There are those who walk in shadows, their strength forged in the crucible of silence. Such was the demeanor of the woman we find standing on the precipice of her own self-worth. She was not a person given to loud displays or fervent cries for attention. Hers was a power that thrummed beneath the surface, unnoticed by those too blind to appreciate the quiet. In the stillness of her existence, she became a sovereign unto herself, a monarch without a court ruler of realms confined to her solitude. Her story began not with the clangor of broken trust, but rather the eerie quietude that follows before the storm breaches the horizon, that moment where silence carries the weight of 1,000 unspoken words and darkness becomes the canvas upon which betrayal sketches its intentions. This woman's heart had long been tethered to duty, a duty she embraced wholeheartedly until its chains became too binding, its weight too ponderous to ignore. The event that marked a critical juncture in her life orbited around a family gathering, one she was conspicuously not invited to, a festivity orchestrated by her daughter-in-law who wielded control like a marionettist, pulling strings in a family dance that deliberately left her mother-in-law isolated in a corner forgotten. The rejection burned deeply, rekindling old wounds where familial support should have stitched love. Why would one endure such indignity in silence? Too often society dictates familiarity to be synonymous with acceptance, even when that familiarity is a hollow shell lacking any genuine connection. Herein lies the paradox. Her silence was misconstrued as acquiescence, her steadfastness mistaken for surrender. But inwardly she cultivated a resolve as unyielding as the ocean's depths, burgeoning with the promise of reclamation. It wasn't surrender, no. It was the strategic retreat of a queen awaiting her moment. You think strength lies in shouting from the rooftops, but what if this silence is the very crucible where resilience is forged? In these hushed hours she recounts a life spent in quiet supplication to a family that grew increasingly dismissive, her every sacrifice rendered to invisible dust. Years melded into years of whispered devotion, swept under the rug of domestic obligation. She was, after all, not a woman of war, yet warfare had found her regardless. Her spirit became the battlefield where past and present clashed, where whispers in the dark gave birth to recriminations louder than any spoken word. How does one navigate a life of silent servitude, perpetually uninvited and undervalued? She learned to map the contours of her pain, tracing its expanses like one might with familiar stars. Such ignorance practiced by her family was as potent as betrayal. They failed to see the storm within her silence, the burgeoning tempest that had been stirred by years of neglect. Yet, contrary to their false perceptions, quietude never signaled her retreat. Rather, it heralded the sage's transcendence, the healer's refrain, and the lioness's nurtured patience. And so, within the quiet revolt of her heart, she began to plan her return, the path to self-worth, long and arduous, lined with thorns of acknowledgement and recognition. She resolved to transmute the shadows of the past into the light of future possibilities. By rejecting the chains of her own silence, she would rise not as a phoenix from ashes, but as a sovereign unbound, ready to claim her kingdom, not through vengeance but through self-assertion and undeniable presence. Her silence, which some perceived as a flaw, became indeed the weapon she longed to unsheathe, a testament to the enduring power of quiet resilience and the silent charge of a warrior at peace with herself. For in silence she had found her strength. What appeared to others as submission was, in truth, the prelude to her awakening. The echoes of her resolve would eventually reverberate through the lives of those who underestimated her, transforming what was once unseen into something undeniably powerful. Emily stood amid the chaos of her son's home, a house that had once been her beacon of hope, but had now transformed into a crucible testing her endurance. 3 years had passed since she sold her cherished house, a place rich with memories of laughter and life, to help her son and daughter-in-law secure a new home. It had seemed an act of love, an investment in her family's future, yet the crucible demanded far more than she had anticipated, leaving her longing for the warmth of her own hearth. The shift from homeowner to invisible entity was gradual yet ruthless. Each day unfolded into a monotonous cycle of chores, their physical toll overshadowed only by the emotional weight of neglect. Her contributions were frequent, but acknowledgement was a rarity. The dishes she washed became a testament to her existence. Each scrub was an echo of her unrecognized diligence. each drop of soap a tear unseen by those she held dear. Gradually, the family dynamic redefined her role. Blood ties and emotional bonds transformed into financial obligations and silent expectations. Her son, once a source of pride and joy, had inadvertently become the patriarch whose kingdom she now served without title or recognition. Meanwhile, her daughter-in-law wielded control with an iron grip cloaked in velvet, her affections sparingly bestowed in the form of quiet dismissals and verbal slights. Despite the camaraderie she imagined when their lives converged, Emily found herself cast aside in her own narrative. The family gatherings she meticulously arranged now excluded her, invites no longer reaching her doorstep, and as she stood on the threshold of her life, the echoes of her sacrifices reverberated in the empty halls where her contributions went unspoken. Yet, this house divided was not merely a structure of bricks and wood, but an edifice of emotional debts accrued through years of silent endurance. It became a crucible for Emily to confront her reality, a chance to redefine her value beyond domesticity. The foundation of her despair deepened in moments both big and small: a birthday unacknowledged, a holiday spent alone in the bedroom, listening to laughter that once included her. Despite the drudgery, Emily remained steadfast. Hidden beneath the veneer of compliance was a woman who knew her worth, one whose silent protests were planning an unprecedented uprising. She recognized how effortlessly she had become invisible, not just within the confines of this house, but in the perceptions of her own family. Yet her silence was never a concession, it was the prologue to action. Reflecting on every dusted shelf, every meal cooked, she began seeing them not as familial obligations, but as investments of affection demanding reparation. Here, in this space fraught with neglect, a stronger resolve brewed within her heart. Each slight by her son and his wife, each imperceptible burden she shouldered, served to fuel her transformation. Community around her started to notice. A neighbor curious about the vivacious woman she once knew questioned the shift in Emily's aura. People whispered of her changed life, the whispers evolving into quiet support that Emily found unexpectedly empowering. It was in this recognition from others that she realized the importance of asserting her silent strength, turning the personal into the universal. She knew she couldn't continue being an unpaid caretaker, a ghost in a home she helped build. A tangible solution, practical and empowering, began to emerge. This house with its torn familial fabric would become her stage for a declaration of selfhood. Here in the shadows, a queen was being crowned quietly and decisively, resolving to bind her sacrifices to tangible results. Emily knew the legal path she might take was fraught with challenges, but the thought of reclaiming her own life was worth the struggle. It was not vengeance she sought, but justice for every woman who had played the background in their own story. As she prepared her strategy to address the imbalance, Emily redefined revenge, not as retribution, but as a revaluation of her own worth, echoing a desire for lasting change. Her resolve became a clarion call to others, and whispers of her actions resonated among those in similar straits. Empowerment blossomed from her steadfastness, and Emily became both a beacon and a warning, illustrating the consequences of familial neglect and the inevitable rise of a woman aware of her worth. Her journey was set not merely to reclaim a past injustice, but to forge a path brighter and wider than ever before. And as Emily stood at the precipice of this new chapter, she was no longer the invisible matriarch of a divided house, but a sovereign, her steps marking the dawning of her own era. There Emily stood poised between the shadows of her past and the dawning light of her newly defined future. The fateful night when an indifferent message pierced the heart of her familial bonds had been transformative, galvanizing a resolve that lay dormant within her for far too long. She had been pushed aside, her presence diminished to little more than an inconvenience. Yet where there lay pain, determination of a different sort was born, one that sought not just restitution, but a reclamation of her own dignity and self-worth. The cool determination in her eyes was reflected in the meticulous planning she took upon herself. It was time to assert what was rightfully hers, not through vengeance, but through a principled reassertion of her presence and contributions. Armed with a trove of financial records and substantial proof of her investments, Emily began drafting a strategy that would not only redeem her equity in the house, but also restore the respect she deserved within the family. This plan was not just about brick and mortar. It was about setting the cornerstone of her self-worth into the very foundations of her world. Every legal document she gathered became a testament to her unyielding patience and sacrifices. It was a silent scream against every instance where her generosity and care had been taken for granted. She reached out to a friend who had once walked a similar path of betrayal and redemption, whose legal foresight could illuminate the nebulous corridors of justice she now intended to navigate. Together, they crafted a path that was as much about protecting her future as it was about reclaiming past dues. The decision to confront her son and daughter-in-law was fraught with emotional complexity. On one hand, there was the ache of betrayal, on the other, the strength derived from years of love and support she had freely given. But now that love needed to be redefined, not as a currency to be spent, but as a foundation upon which mutual respect could be rebuilt. Emily's intentions were clear. This was not just a personal journey, but a clarion call for familial accountability, a firm stand against the invisibility that marred so many matriarchs in homes across the world. Emily was no longer invisible, nor was she alone. Her story, much like a ripple in a pond, began to echo beyond her immediate circle. Conversations that once remained hushed were now being voiced in local coffee shops, forums, and whispered confidences between friends. Suddenly, there was a gathering of women who found in Emily's rise the inspiration and courage to confront their own unjust circumstances. Her steadfast pursuit was becoming a movement, a testament that even in the darkest familial shadows, a queen could be crowned with the light of her own resolve. As Emily moved forward, meticulously orchestrating her plan, there was a sense of unfolding power. It was as if the very universe acknowledged her plight and began conspiring to align opportunities in her favor. She was not just accumulating paperwork. She was constructing a new narrative in which she was not merely participating, but actively leading. Each step, each decision reverberated with the silent support of every woman who had ever felt reduced to the background of her family's story. In every detail of her planning, Emily's sense of self-worth blossomed, intertwining with the justice she so rightfully demanded. Her actions were more than mere responses. They were declarations of selfhood, a promise to herself that she would no longer be overshadowed by others' expectations or indifference. And as the whispers of her determination spread, a transformation took place within her family, too slow and tentative yet unavoidably present. They could no longer ignore the awakening matriarch in their midst, nor overlook the realization that she was, in fact, the keystone of their family's foundation. Yet this story of awakening resonated beyond Emily's immediate life. Her journey became a reflection of resilience and empowerment, offering an example to countless others who found themselves entrenched in similar shadows. It was a potent reminder that no matter how subdued one's voice might seem within the confines of family, it carried the power to resonate, to reverberate, and ultimately to reform. Thus, Emily, guided by clarity and unintended consequences of a dismissive message, reclaimed more than her investments. She reclaimed the narrative of her life. She stood firm not just for herself but for an entire tapestry of silent perseverance woven through generations, waiting to be unfurled with courage and conviction. Every quivering paper she held, every line of text she absorbed was a stepping stone, laid with purpose, leading to a threshold where justice and her own reasserted identity awaited her arrival. It was the dawn of her new era. The sun cast sharp shadows as she stepped onto the pavement, the brisk air carrying with it not just a chill but a sense of clarity that pierced through the haziness of past decisions. Her friend, steadfast and reassuring, stood by her side, while her niece offered a presence both comforting and pragmatic, reflecting a shared sense of injustice. Today was the day everything changed, not because a grand plan of vengeance was being unfurled, but because she was taking the conscientious step of asserting her rights in a world that had long ignored her contributions. The weight of the family's betrayal pressed heavily upon her, yet it was a burden she was now willing to bear as a prelude to liberation. The years of assuming a role that was never truly recognized had produced not just hurt but a simmering resolve that demanded to be acknowledged. Now, bolstered by the meticulous work of gathering legal documents and financial records, she had armed herself with both knowledge and an understanding of her worth. This was more than a legal maneuver. It was an act of reclaiming the dignity that had been slowly eroded over time. As she brushed her fingers over the bound edges of the legal papers, the reality of her situation was engraved in each movement. The decision to pursue legal recourse was not born out of malice but rather necessity, a boundary setting, a line drawn in the sand to redefine relationships that had become irreparably lopsided. It was a pivot away from the silence of suppressed disappointment, moving towards a vocal assertion tethered to rights that had long been overlooked. The presence of her niece was a testament to familial strength and belief in justice, offering a sense of continuity and support that stretched beyond immediate ties. Feeling the layers of past years peel away, she reflected on the deep emotional wounds inflicted by her family. The disappointment was not merely about an unkind word or neglectful act, but the sum total of being rendered invisible despite sacrifices that should have bound them closer together. Their indifference became both a dagger and a galvanizing force, propelling her towards a future where she dictated the terms of her engagement with them, a future punctuated by the sincerity of legal declarations and the protection afforded by structured agreements. The law office was a modest affair, its quiet efficiency offering solace as she was introduced to the possibilities of legal restitution. The discussion about actions and consequences was clinical, yet between every exchange lay her personal history demanding attention and respect it had long been denied. She was careful to tread a line that was neither emotional nor vindictive, seeking rather to create an indisputable narrative that underscored her sacrifices. Her ally, the lawyer, played his role with deftness, understanding that this was not just about paper and signatures, but healing and propriety. Here, in this office of legalese, fragments of her heartbreak were being meticulously pieced together into a coherent claim, restoring not just property but personhood. The journey ahead was complex and fraught with potential obstacles, but today marked a firm commencement to her redefined interactions with her family. It was here, as she stepped out of the office, that gratitude intertwined with resolve, sending a message not solely to her family, but to the world. The silent, enduring sufferer was no more. Now stood a person prepared to command respect, equipped not just with the backing of formal representation, but an internal compass pointing towards self-respect and justice. As her friend clasped her hand in silent solidarity, and her niece voiced encouraging affirmations, she understood the value of allies, of the collective voices that refused to allow her to dissolve unremarkably into the backdrop. This collective strength fortified her, serving as a compass toward newfound boundaries and self-worth that had taken root amidst the rubble of familial dismissal. She realized that every step taken today was a rebirth. She was turning the page, writing in bold strokes on the canvas of her life, in colors that spoke of courage and autonomy. Through the haze of what once was a new vista stretched ahead, one framed not merely by legalities, but by the heart's tenacious insistence on recognition and wholeness. With her hand gripping tightly onto a future, secured by every strategic move, the sun warmed her resolve, whispering of the pathways to be trodden anew, where justice and a life redefined awaited on her own uncompromising terms. As legal notices were discreetly deposited into the hands of her son and daughter-in-law, the air was electrified with unspoken but palpable gravity. A reality previously unimaginable now loomed large, leaving her family to confront the inevitable consequences of their actions with trepidation. The protagonist, standing at the precipice of confrontation, felt the dual pull of empowerment and melancholy swirl within her. She was not merely a figure demanding recompense for material investments. She was a mother whose sacrifices had been erased, now inscribed again with the clarity of formal avowal. The son, clad in a veneer of indifference, read the words starkly printed on the official document. These were not mere sentences, but a narrative that articulated the narrative of sacrifice and disregard previously obscured by the everyday humdrum of familial dynamics. The daughter-in-law, adept at weaving facades, sensed the shifting sands beneath her feet. The once rock-solid ground of assumed entitlement felt precariously brittle. Her mind raced through a whirlwind of what-ifs and if-onlys, a stark realization that the scaffolding supporting their foundational comforts was crumbling. For the protagonist, this was more than a confrontation with her family. It was a poignant rendezvous with herself. She was torn between the resolute woman taking a stand and the tender mother whose love had been overlooked and undervalued. Yet there, within that bittersweet synthesis, lay the essence of her resurgence. She could now profess the duality of tough love, a love steeled by the depth of its backstory, reborn in the guise of self-respect and self-fulfillment. Events unfurled as if in a play, a modern-day reckoning, where roles were called into question and scripts rewritten with newfound truths. Anticipating the storm, she revisited past memories, feelings colored with heavy brushes of nostalgia and betrayal. These were the transcripts of shared moments replete with scenes of laughter and tears that were gradually overshadowed by silence and erasure. This time, with evidence of her contributions gleaming under the light of scrutiny, there awaited clarity and acknowledgement, if not from her family, then from herself. Looking on, the son and daughter-in-law vacillated between denial and reluctant acknowledgement. They suddenly realized that the paradigm that had silently operated in the background was being interrogated. The status quo they had taken for granted stood interrogated, forcing them to reconsider assumptions and expectations. Could they adapt, or would they falter under the impending legal and emotional weight? In the echoes of this orchestration, the protagonist readied herself. To face them, yes, but more importantly, to face a life where she was no longer the shadow cast by others but a figure luminously hers. Anticipation grazed her consciousness, not for a dramatic showdown but for the nuanced revelations that such confrontations often bring, a meeting of truth and consequence. How far, then, would her family go to rectify the past negligence, to tender respect for the matriarch they had deemed relegable? The letters of the law thus dispatched marked the uncertain threshold of a new normal. In the thick of her mixed emotions, she understood the opportunity for them and for herself to pivot towards redemption. This was no simple family squabble. It was a profound narrative, tightly interwoven with strands of duty, love, and restitution. Each tick of the clock welded an unyielding resolve in her not to succumb to the pull of regret, but to ascend with newfound autonomy. While externally a legal interlude, it was the emotional reverberations that bore the potential to alter family dynamics fundamentally. Would the son, would the daughter-in-law apprehend the gravity behind the legality? These were the questions that punctuated the stillness of night. Ultimately, the reconciliation of roles shifted in unpredictable ways, weaving a tapestry of potentials between what could be reclaimed and what had been irretrievably lost. Here, the protagonist did not recede into passive anticipation. Instead, she strategically forged onward, armed with the empathy hardened in amelioration. This confrontation might not end with hugs and reconciliations, but it might well be the sacred space where truth cast its bare illumination over years of avoidant comfort. With each unfolding moment, she reaffirmed her readiness, poised for the impending personal and familial reckoning, a rite of passage delicately poised on the precipice of heartbreak and healing. Through the nexus of digital communication, she stumbled upon others who had tread similar desolate paths. It was here, amidst forums teeming with stories of indignation and resurrection, that she uncovered a community of women whose collective spirit mirrored her silent struggle. They were grandmothers, mothers, and sisters whose familial accords had dissolved into the ether of unspoken expectations and neglectful abandon. Here, on platforms where each story was an outcry of personal turmoil turned triumph, she found the galvanizing power of shared experience. Her narrative did not unravel as a lament, but rather as a beacon, subtly laced with a call to arms against the vestiges of familial exploitation. It began as a whisper, an intimate confession interwoven with the digital fabric of an empathetic audience, and soon burgeoned into a movement. In the virtual embrace of those who understood her tribulations, she found validation and solidarity. This camaraderie, though virtual, forged bonds robust enough to transcend the limitations of space, propelling her resolve into the realms of transformative action. Every comment echoed with encouragement, while thrumming with the subtle urgings for justice long overdue. And so her decision to unveil her plight publicly ignited a spark that danced across screens and seeped into the consciousness of those who had endured in silent resignation. The disposition of justice was no longer confined to lost aspirations. The manuscript of her life was becoming a touchstone, invoking incendiary change not just for her but for a contingent of women searching for affirmation amid their own narratives of sacrifice. In sharing her odyssey, she unwittingly cast herself into the role of a pioneer, not bound by her unique circumstances, but unified with others through a shared impetus to reclaim their worth. Her act of sharing was a deft maneuver with cascading implications, a catalyst reverberating beyond her own sphere and within the psyches of others, whose stories, though similarly melancholic, awaited emancipation. She became the embodiment of a nascent rebellion against the quintessence of familial subjugation. The validation proved to be an elixir once unfathomable that coursed through her veins, eradicating traces of isolation. In a manner, it was this chorus of distant voices, binding together a tapestry of courage, that empowered her to stride into the throes of familial confrontations with a steadfast heart. And so, as if led by the invisible hands of her newfound allies, she pressed forward, not merely with the vigor to right the wrongs plotted against her, but with an acute awareness of her newfound influence. For these women, her companions in narrative and in strength, were emboldened by her assertions. Her narrative encouraged their resolve to challenge expositions of exploitation camouflaged as familial duty. In each forum, in every digital enclave, she frequented stories like hers collided, creating a maelstrom of discourse that knotted together tales of redemption and new beginnings. And there, amid the digital dialogue, emerged an undercurrent of actionable change. With every keystroke, she redrew the line between passive acquiescence and determined autonomy, inspiring others to calibrate their axes in pursuit of justice, respect, and dignity long denied. Empowerment breathed through the dialogues, she initiated an invocation for others to transcend circumstantial victimhood for the sanctity of self-awareness instilled by words that shaded into empowerment. And gradually, many within the digital myriad began tracing similar blueprints to emancipation. She was no longer the sole warrior against invisibility, but rather a venerated symbol of hope, a guidepost illuminating pathways toward familial truths heretofore buried beneath layers of harrowing concession. She elucidated concrete strategies, legal channels, to traverse emotional reservoirs to draw from all, while nurturing the visceral bond with those scattered across different walks of life. And so, in a remarkable exercise of shared resilience, this collective of women mirrored the protagonist's journey, rising together as conscripted champions of their destinies. It became a collective symphony, one they would indelibly emblazon onto the ethos of family dynamics, spurred on by a woman who once, stripping off the shackles of servitude, ennobled others through her paradigm of courage and transformation. In the footsteps of her digital march toward deliverance, she found not just allies but also a testament to the power of a solitary voice elevated into a crescendo of change. Her narrative, now unlost among kindred echoes, wove its way into a newly envisaged future scripted by resilience, forthrightness, and a profound sense of self-worth reclaimed not just for herself, but for many who dared to dream alongside her. The air in the notary's office was thick with unspoken truths and the weight of unacknowledged injustices. The protagonist sat poised, her demeanor a blend of fortitude and unrelenting resolve. Across the table, her son and daughter-in-law fidgeted, perhaps for the first time, truly reckoning with the tapestry of neglect they had woven, a tapestry that now threatened to unravel their financial and emotional security. The protagonist's ultimatum was clear, and in the sterile confines of this office, she held firm to her demands. It wasn't just about the property, although the money she'd invested gave her every right to exert her claim. It was also about the intangible restitution of dignity and respect, concepts that had long been alien in the familial dynamics she found herself redefining. The quiet power of her voice cut through the room, a reminder that her silence was no longer to be taken for granted. Her daughter-in-law Emily shifted uncomfortably, her earlier disregard now replaced by a desperate reconsideration of past actions. For years, she had been content to let the protagonist's sacrifices blend into the background noise of domestic life. Yet sitting here, the immensity of her oversight began to crystallize. It wasn't a gentle dawning, it was an abrupt awakening to the cost of her indifference. As the son grappled with his subconscious guilt, two choices emerged before him. The first was to resist, lean into the denial that had served him so well. The second, however, was a path less traveled, to acknowledge the intricate web of his mother's discontent as the result of his own omissions. His contemplative silence was indicative of an inner conflict, the kind that pits inherited family patterns against newfound awareness. The notary, acting as an impartial observer, completed the documents with a mechanical efficiency that belied the pulsating emotions in the room. Onlookers might have mistaken this transaction for a mere financial negotiation, unaware of the historical burdens quietly being addressed. For the protagonist, every signed paper was a silent victory, a contractual symbol of regained autonomy. Meanwhile, her insistence on a partial property claim illustrated a masterstroke of strategic foresight, forcing her son's family to confront her sacrifices and, in turn, their own complacency. Each term was crafted with precise intent, ensuring her place in the narrative of her life, a narrative she was reshaping with each passing moment. Then came the call for emotional restitution. This aspect wasn't quantifiable yet. Its absence had loomed over countless family gatherings and ordinary days. She wasn't seeking apologies that might come too easily, but rather the acknowledgement of a lifetime's worth of unreciprocated care. It was a plea for her tireless contributions to be seen valued beyond peripheral appreciation. In the opposing corner, Emily's internal landscape of denial was slowly eroding, making way for a tentative understanding. Might empathy serve as the bridge toward reconciliation? The concept echoed throughout the negotiations, yet demanded more than a perfunctory nod. It required introspection and a resolve to amend ingrained behavior. Faced with this undeniable reality, both son and daughter-in-law began to articulate an embryonic recognition of their part in this discord. Their responses, halting and uncertain, hinted at the fragility of their newly budding awareness. They knew now that reparation would not come from words alone, but from actions that echoed their intent. For the protagonist, it wasn't enough to reclaim her formal share. Her heart yearned for tangible change, a shift in the emotional spectrum that might with time rectify the imbalance of their relationship. She sought not revenge, but balance, a move towards a future where boundaries merged with familial care, where love coexisted with respect. This gathering at the notary's office, far from a resolution, was the inception of a journey laden with potential redemption. It was a chapter in which all involved were compelled to redefine long-standing assumptions and craft a new understanding penned with the ink of sincerity. As they exited the notary's sanctum, the protagonist took a moment to reflect. Though the path ahead was uncertain, she possessed the unwavering resolve to forge it anew. Her narrative was no longer one of passive endurance but of active creation, a testament to resilience that cast her not as a victim of circumstances but as a formidable architect of her own destiny. The echoes of this day would resound well beyond the sterile confines of the office, reverberating into a future she would shape with incisive determination and newfound autonomy. The layers of tension had shifted, transforming into an uneasy equilibrium. The son and daughter-in-law understood that the conditions imposed by the protagonist were not merely about financial gain. They were lessons in empathy, exercises in walking in the shoes she had worn for so long. These terms were crafted with the deliberation of someone who wanted to sculpt not just her future, but also to mold the very fabric of familial understanding. She knew what it was like to linger in shadows, navigating a space not entirely her own, and she was adamant that this experience be shared. Opening the doors to tenants was more than a pragmatic decision. It was a narrative woven with threads of karma and consciousness. With every agreement signed, it symbolized a movement from isolation to shared existence, compelling her family to collide and coexist with individuals who would inadvertently force them to reconsider the dynamic of a home. This shift necessitated an empathy that echoed the protagonist's past, where cooperation had dwindled under the guise of dependency. The son and daughter-in-law now had to negotiate those spaces not merely under a mother's affectionate gaze but through the discerning eyes of strangers. Evenings no longer resonated with the unwelcome silence that once drew a line between presence and participation. Instead, the introduction of tenants brought life, a breath of shared stories and diverse backgrounds into their domestic tapestry. Each stranger living under their roof held a mirror up to the son and daughter-in-law, reflecting behaviors they had ignored or dismissed. It wasn't simply about renting out rooms, but about fostering environments where interaction blossomed into understanding. For the protagonist, there was a subtle satisfaction in seeing this evolution unfold. It was as if she were orchestrating a grand play where each character was unwittingly placed into roles designed for enlightenment. She had been silently rehearsing her own lines for years, waiting for this moment to improvise new dialogues in her relationships. As the son grappled with the realization of shared living, his mother observed the seeds of humility starting to root in his consciousness, an unexpected shift from the entitlement he had grown accustomed to. The daughter-in-law, too, found herself questioning the boundaries she had so confidently drawn. Conversations at the dinner table, once confined to familial tedium, now sprawled into discussions that demanded her attention and empathy. And therein lay the protagonist's genius, the ability to create conditions where change was subtle yet impactful, where every interaction was a lesson, and every moment a chance for redemption. Yet it wasn't purely about materializing an epiphany. Legal structures held the foundation firm. The contracts that tenants adhered to were penned with as much precision as her familial stipulations. Empathy without accountability was nothing more than an unfulfilled promise. These legalities provided structure, ensuring the respect deserving of each inhabitant. They were documents that screamed validation and mutual respect, embodying the balance of power the protagonist sought to establish. As months passed, old patterns were slowly disrupted. The protagonist's son found himself in conversations with tenants about mundane matters that slowly gave way to deeper discussions, perspectives he had never considered. For the daughter-in-law, sharing her cooking space with tenants opened an unexpected avenue for cultural exchange, fostering an unexpected respect for diversity she had previously only seen as intrusive. Through all this, the protagonist's impact was transformative, framing every interaction as both a challenge and an opportunity. Indeed, the house became a beacon of reflective practice, each inhabitant evolving under its roof, a silent revolution catalyzed by one woman's journey from submission to stewardship. The emotional echoes of such a carefully constructed reality continued to ripple into dialogues and dreams of what a communal life meant. In private, the protagonist's moments were those of cautious introspection, examining past pains with a wiser lens, understanding that while the path of empathy is fraught with challenges, it yields the kind of transformation money could never buy. Each evening she spent alone in her new room was infused with a lingering sense of purpose, a quiet celebration of her evolution from occupant to orchestrator. Yet amid her triumphs, she maintained vigilance. Her strength was not etched in bitterness but bathed in the clarity of justice served through understanding rather than pure retribution. This pivotal lesson ensured that those who had marginalized her now became her enlightened allies, recognizing her not just as a part of their lives but as an integral force shaping their futures. This carefully contrived lesson in coexistence, long undervalued, gently pushed the needle from conflict to comprehension. The protagonist knew that this wasn't the end of her journey but merely the beginning, a narrative unfolding not just for her family but for herself, laying bare possibilities once shrouded in resignation. Thus her legacy began to take form, defined by wisdom and fierce compassion, echoing in the lives of those who thought they knew her, awakening in them a respect they should have tendered long ago. The family therapy sessions began cautiously, with unspoken tensions lingering in the air like static charge waiting for release. The road to mending broken bonds is seldom straightforward, and the inclusion of a therapist provided the necessary third-party objectivity that neither mother nor son could claim. The protagonist, while ready for the arduous journey of healing, carried her newfound strength as both shield and compass, guiding her through the emotional terrain laid before them. Initially, the conversation felt strained, words layered with years of accumulated hurt and misunderstanding. But as they delved deeper, guided by therapeutic structure, generations of silence began to unravel. With surprising candor, the son opened up about his perception of abandonment and neglect, misconceptions magnified by years of unspoken expectations. The therapist skillfully nudged them toward empathy, highlighting how both had carried the weight of their roles, unaware of how similarly burdened the other was. The protagonist, standing firm in her resolve, knew that grace did not mean yielding to old ways, but instead offered her son the kind of mercy she wished she had received in her moments of lesser judgment. As the therapy sessions progressed, she set boundaries with clarity and compassion, ensuring she was no longer relegated to the background of her own story. The sessions became a dance of vulnerability and strength, a testament to human resilience and willingness to rewrite a shared history marred by misalignment. Moreover, the dialogue soon traversed familial lines. The daughter-in-law, despite her earlier distance, began participating, urged by a genuine desire to understand her role in the discord. Her presence, initially stiff and seemingly obligatory, gradually transformed into a sincere pursuit of healing. As she listened, perhaps for the first time truly, she began to see the protagonist not as an adversary, but as a testament to endurance and maternal dedication. Throughout these sessions, the theme of accountability was painstakingly woven into the fabric of their progress. Both son and daughter-in-law came to recognize how their dismissal of the protagonist inadvertently taught their children the acceptability of such relational disregard. Redemption required a conscious undoing of such lessons, now learning from a woman they had feared would only be a specter of their guilt. Each revelation was an echo of things left unsaid, now liberated by courageous dialogue. Yet the protagonist knew that without continued effort, relapse into old patterns was a lurking danger. The therapy provided not just a means of catharsis, but also an education in sustainable communication, offering skills that the family could employ outside the therapist's watchful eye. Despite the emotional obstacles, these therapy sessions became the forge in which newer, healthier bonds were shaped. They cultivated a space where being heard was more than a sporadic allowance. It became a family staple. It was in this burgeoning trust that the son began to reposition his mother, not as a faded picture of past sacrifices, but as a vibrant illustration of continued relevance in their lives. The protagonist remained vigilant, cognizant that true progress required marrying patience with tempered expectations. Although mutual understanding seemed possible, she guarded against false reconciliations grounded in mere sentimentality. Her approach was pragmatic. She measured their actions, not promises, holding them accountable for their journey back to familial wholeness. Still, there were bright glimmers of progress. Simple moments long overlooked began to carry weight, shared discussions over dinner, laughter, renewing its place at their gatherings. Over time, these familial interactions transcended the rigidity of obligations, becoming genuine expressions of connectivity. The son, learning to see his mother through a new lens, rediscovered aspects of their bond that his vacuous pride had obscured. The protagonist's influence was subtly unwinding the tightly wound strings of separation, strumming them into harmonies of forgiveness and rediscovered affection. They navigated this repaired relationship with cautious optimism, the therapy sessions continuing to act as reminders of their potential for positive transformation. There were times of relapse, sure, days laden with exhausted dialogues, but these moments became less a default state and more a point of reflection. As communication deepened, the family realigned. The son, with a burgeoning appreciation for the path his mother had walked, began to support this new family dynamic. The daughter-in-law, too, in her attempts at reconciliation, found solace in the protagonist's steady guidance, recognizing the value in forging a respectful alliance. In this renewed chapter, the family coexistence became a joint endeavor, not a battleground of wills, but an arena of shared dreams. So, with the help of structured reflection and introspective work, they began rebuilding, bracing their bonds with humility and awareness, a journey no longer fettered by history, but propelled by a future marked by mutual respect. Their efforts paid homage to both matriarch and descendant, woven into a tapestry redefining what it meant to be a family. The arrival of new tenants in the household acted as a catalyst for change, conjuring a new dynamic that demanded consideration and adaptation from all sides. This freshly woven tapestry of shared living posed a new set of challenges and insights, each thread offering an opportunity to redefine relationships, boundaries, and selves. The protagonist, the maternal figure once invisible in her sphere, now sat at the heart of this evolving microcosm, guiding its symphony with a mix of vigilant authority and gentle compassion. At first, the presence of external tenants brought discomfort and frazzled nerves. What was once a sacrosanct place of familial retreat now necessitated a reimagining of space that blurred the lines of personal versus communal. Privacy, once taken for granted by each family member, in their isolated silos of misunderstanding and unspoken grievances, morphed into a poignant experience where sharing took precedence over solitude. These tenants, unaware of the familial history engraved within those walls, inadvertently became detached observers, functioning as silent catalysts, encouraging mutual respect and understanding simply through their presence. For the son, the experience served as a painful yet enlightening reminder of what it might have felt like for his mother when she was unwelcome in her own sanctuary. The eye contact shared with strangers in his erstwhile undisputed space pushed him towards a newfound empathy. Mirror moments when he caught glimpses of his own complacency and prior blindness moved him to gradual awareness of his past actions and dismissals. His journey was not linear, yet it wound upward toward reconciliation with his internal self and those around him. The daughter-in-law Emily, whose prior choices had sowed division, embarked on an inward journey of reflection and recalibration. She learned not just to acknowledge her previous transgressions, but to actively work towards building bridges and nurturing shared spaces with her now indignant, yet hopeful mother-in-law. This change in her, too, was spurred by the contrasting perspectives brought in by the tenants. The household, once a battleground of silent judgments and internal spats, began to feel the first whispers of unity. In navigating this harmonious discord, new manners of cooperation emerged. The communal sharing of chores, dinners, and decisions became necessary. The parties involved unearthed admiration for different cultures and opinions, values, and practices brought into their home life by the new occupants. A kaleidoscope of shared meals and anecdotes painted a new Weltanschauung, one that discarded prejudices and assumptions in favor of intentional vulnerability and strategic peacemaking. Throughout this evolution, the protagonist held steadfast her cornerstone position. Her support was certain and unwavering as she watched the subtle shifts in the household's atmosphere where once she would have anticipated resistance and retraction. Through the adaptive rhythm of shared spaces there emerged respect, tethered by simple acts of courtesy and mutual concern. Her sons and daughters-in-law learned that hearts soften not under the pressure of swords drawn, but in moments of paused breaths and open receptions. Thus the once acrimony-laden abode transformed into a peaceful enclave slowly yet surely. Children played under watchful eyes filled with care, envisaging a hope where previously only grudges thrived. Everyone learned the value of articulating needs, listening with intent and holding space for each person's journey without the interruption of past grievances. Through the tenants' lodgings, the family discovered that sharing their roof indeed strengthened the foundation they sought to rebuild, a foundation that persevered and thrived on cooperation, respect, and unity. Such a transformation could not happen merely by will alone, but by a lived commitment to change a narrative once fraught with dissonance to one orchestrated by symbiosis and shared dreams. This transformative experience did not just provide redemption, it ensured growth and healing. Through the synchronized steps towards a renewed coexistence, what commenced as a fragmented familial exercise morphed into a dynamic proving ground. Here, memories of past trials served as the fulcrum upon which change initiated its course, pointing everyone to a more luminous future where the woman who had once felt discarded now held the central note in a finely attuned harmony. Emily's awakening began softly and unexpectedly. She had been living under the delusion that her world was complete until the cracks appeared, forcing her to confront the frayed relationships she had woven around herself. In the shadows of regret and remorse, she found the courage to seek forgiveness. It was not an easy road fraught with defenses and silent screams of pride, but Emily saw no other way to rebuild bridges she had so carelessly allowed to burn. Her first step was simple yet profound acknowledgement. Emily realized that her actions had caused a ripple effect, much like a stone thrown into a serene pond, disturbing its tranquility. She sought out the woman she had wronged, the mother-in-law who had felt both discarded and disrespected. The one who now stood as a symbol of strength and defiance, having erected boundaries as formidable as her resolve. Emily approached her with a sincerity that was both earnest and poignant, admitting her past failings with a humility that mirrored the gravity of her actions. At first, the protagonist harbored skepticism. Years of deep-seated resentment and emotional betrayal had created a barrier that forgiveness alone could not easily dismantle. Yet within those cautious bounds lay a flicker of hope, a desire to believe in genuine change rather than fleeting remorse. She understood that forgiveness was not a one-time act but an ongoing process. It required vigilance to ensure her own well-being and protect the independence she had fought so ardently to reclaim. Emily's quest for redemption required consistency and acts of contrition. She began to invest her time and energy into small yet significant gestures that demonstrated her commitment to change. Whether it was through weekly family dinners or simple moments of heartfelt conversation, each interaction was carefully crafted, serving as both an apology and an olive branch. Emily wanted to become the daughter-in-law who was not just seen but heard and valued, striving to transform her perceived apology into action. Simultaneously, Emily worked on herself. She delved into the recesses of her psyche, exploring the reasons behind her past behavior. Turning to therapy, Emily was able to unearth old patterns and unravel the threads of her upbringing that had influenced her relational dynamics. Through introspection, she learned to chart a course that prioritized empathy and understanding over rigid expectations and superficial judgments. The process was arduous, often filled with setbacks that threatened to undermine her progress. Yet Emily persevered slowly, chipping away at the barriers she had once erected between herself and her family. She learned that trust could not be commanded, but must be earned through steadfast dedication and authenticity. Each tear shed and every word spoken was a step toward dismantling the fortress of resentment that had long confined her. For the protagonist, Emily's journey was a reminder of the resilience found within forgiveness. It illuminated the possibility of reconciliation when intentions were genuine and actions aligned. She remained vigilant, ever aware of the fragility of renewed connections, yet she held space for the hope that transformation could indeed blossom in the most unlikely of soil. As Emily continued to evolve, she began to see her mother-in-law not as an adversary, but as a mentor in resilience. Their relationship, once defined by discord, gradually transformed into one marked by mutual respect and understanding. The protagonist, too, found herself learning from Emily's tribulations. A woman once entrenched in her own shortcomings, yet willing to forge a path toward redemption. These shared experiences etched a new chapter in their family saga. It was a journey that highlighted growth, illustrating that forgiveness was both empowering and liberating when intertwined with the intention to change. In the act of forgiving, the protagonist reclaimed her power, ensuring her legacy would be defined not by past grievances but by her capacity for grace and the courage to guide those around her towards a more luminous future. And so, through measured trust and purposeful strides toward healing, Emily and the protagonist navigated the rhythms of forgiveness and transformation. This was not a tale of simple heroes or uncomplicated villains. It was a story of complex individuals, each seeking mastery over their own narratives while stitching together the fabric of a family once thought irreparable. The journey reflected the power of intent and the indelible mark of a heart willing to traverse the depths of redemption. In the quiet aftermath of the storm, the protagonist finds herself surrounded by a family very different from the one she once struggled to navigate and yet somehow familiar. The fight for her place within her family, once filled with battles for respect, understanding, and validation, has shifted from a tumultuous war zone to a peaceful haven of renewed connections. The lessons learned through heartache have fostered an environment where sincere interactions replace the fractures of old, and the house, once a battleground of emotionally charged skirmishes, has become a place of healing and growth. Her relationship with her son is a testament to this transformation. These interactions are no longer stilted by the resentments of the past, but are now defined by mutual respect and a shared understanding of the challenges they've faced. The house stands as a symbol of their joint journey, a canvas not just of bricks and mortar, but of the intricate emotional journeys that now bind them together. Amidst the echoes of former discord, the protagonist's presence is a definitive force of gentle strength. Firm and compassionate in her approach, she navigates this reconfigured family landscape with a clear resolve and newfound self-awareness. Her voice, once suppressed beneath the shadow of unappreciated sacrifices, now rings clear, unyielding, in its right to be heard and respected. It's here, amidst this harmony built on hard-won transformation, that her daughter-in-law, Emily, begins to carve a new path. Once an antagonist, Emily now stands as a remarkable reflection of human capacity for change. Her sincere attempts to alter her past behaviors have not gone unnoticed. The protagonist, watching her with cautious yet hopeful eyes, sees Emily as a kindred spirit on the path to redemption, learning from the very trials she once initiated. The family gatherings, once occasions drenched in potential conflict and uneasy silences, now bear witness to heart-to-heart exchanges and laughter. The protagonist's son, recognizing the deep well of wisdom drawn from these experiences, leans more into his role as both a son and a man, rekindled by newfound insight. His gratitude, albeit sometimes unsaid, shines through small acts of kindness and shared moments of familial intimacy, slowly knitting together the frayed edges from years past. The house echoes with stories old wounds whispered about cautiously in order to remind them of how far they've come. It stands not just as a shelter but as a testament to perseverance and change. It remains a living testament of their journey, resonating with life and stories that span frustrations, reconciliations, and newfound joys. In maintaining this delicate balance, the protagonist sees clearly that though the scars of past wounds may fade, the wisdom garnered from them is enduring. Her daughter's redemption is a living narrative she has watched unfold, one where accountability and genuine effort catalyze profound change. The protagonist's guidance has been subtle yet deeply impactful, kindling trust and providing a foundation for understanding. This narrative of the reconfigured family demonstrates the delicate art of moving beyond bitterness into a realm of healing and hope. It is a saga not only of transformation but also of a present carefully tended, ensuring that the future shall not be written in the ink of old grievances but in tones of forgiveness and fortitude. Every effort to bond and communicate further strengthens the thread of unity and love binding their futures. It is this patience and persistence that the protagonist wishes to instill in her grandchildren, impressed upon them not with words of caution, but with stories of personal growth and resilience. In doing so, she firmly establishes a lasting legacy, measured not just by actions but by the deep-rooted values she sows in the fertile grounds of respect and empathy. The journey of rediscovery is far from over, but standing upon the precipice of this new chapter, the family moves forward with renewed hope, their steps lighter and more certain. The protagonist, in her nurturing yet vigilant way, continues to watch over, championing not only her own triumphant journey into resilience and self-worth, but also that of her family. Thus, they move forward together with hearts open and eyes set keenly on the horizon, a horizon painted with the promise of a brighter and more cohesive future. As the family grows in understanding and compassion, each member becomes a storyteller in their own right, co-authors of a family history replete with trials yet rich in triumph, reflecting the enduring strength of love's transformative power. In the aftermath of re-establishing her autonomy and carving out a new life, independent from the shadows of her past, the protagonist finds herself on a path of continuous discovery. The rental income fosters not just financial stability, but the courage to explore the contours of a life unbound by familial expectation. This newfound liberty becomes fertile ground for a personal renaissance as she delves into pursuits that nurture her individuality and autonomy. She embraces community activities, eagerly participating in local events and joining groups where her voice is heard and valued. This rekindled sense of belonging invigorates her, highlighting the importance of social connections in fostering emotional well-being. In therapy, she engages in a profound journey of introspection, allowing her to unravel the layers of identity that were once overshadowed by her roles within her family. Therapy acts as a guiding light, illuminating the paths to self-love and acceptance, vital components often neglected in the haste of navigating life's demands. The protagonist immerses herself in hobbies long forgotten, from painting to gardening, each brushstroke and planted seed symbolizing a step toward reclaiming ownership of her narrative. These acts, though seemingly minor, weave together a tapestry of self-expression and serve as quiet affirmations of her resilience and adaptability. Within these moments of creation, she finds solace and strength, reminding herself that life, much like art, is a canvas where mistakes can become the most beautiful aspects of the picture. As part of her healing process, she consciously sets aside time for self-care, an element once invisible in the backdrop of her life stage. Self-care becomes a testament to her worthiness, a ritualized practice blooming from deliberate days of reflection and relaxation. Mornings begin with mindful meditations, grounding her in the present and imparting clarity to her thoughts and emotions. In embracing this tranquility, she dismantles the inner dialogues of self-doubt and insecurity, replacing them with affirmations of strength and hope. The courage to rewrite one's narrative is no small feat. It requires facing oneself with honesty and compassion, acknowledging past hurts, and daring to dream of a brighter future. This pursuit propels her forward with unwavering determination. Her friendships deepen, her laughter becoming a melody shared among those who stand by her side. Her story of transformation inspires others, sparking a communal narrative that speaks of resilience and liberation. The camaraderie built through shared experiences enriches her life, illustrating the profound impact of interconnectedness. Her family, observing these changes, begins to understand the profound effects of her newfound self-esteem and independence. They witness a woman vibrant and whole, a transition that informs their perspective on their own lives. Her son and daughter-in-law, incentivized by her example, embark on their journeys toward self-betterment. In seeing her thrive, they grasp the nuances of respect and empathy that define familial loyalty and commitment. The protagonist's journey of healing transcends her immediate surroundings, rippling outward into the broader narrative of personal evolution. Her persistence in breaking free from the traditional confines of societal roles paves a path for those who follow. Her legacy, one of unyielding strength and self-compassion, becomes a beacon for those who find themselves lost in the tide of familial duty. This stage in her life is not one of finality, but of continuous growth, a testament to human resilience and the boundless possibilities when one chooses to live authentically. The horizon she gazes upon is not the end, but the beginning of a chapter defined by freedom and choice. Her journey, far from over, continues to inspire and uplift, a vivid reminder that no matter the challenge, there is always a path to a brighter, self-determined destiny. In this quest for closure and continued growth, she embodies the powerful message that it is never too late to reclaim one's life, to redefine one's story, and to live it fully and on one's terms. As she reflects on her journey, the protagonist stands as a testament to the enduring spirit of humanity, unyielding and ever hopeful, capable of turning the tides of misfortune into a symphony of triumph. As she opens a new chapter, meticulously etched with freedom, self-realized dignity, and burgeoning legacy, our protagonist finds herself fully engaged in the artful dance of life lived on her own terms. Returning to a home that now encapsulates not just a geographical place but a state of being, she gently settles into a peaceful existence defined by carefully chosen engagements and authentic relationships. This is a world meticulously crafted from the remnants of past experiences and forged with the fire of newfound independence. Amidst the quiet reflections on the path that brought her here, there stands a proud matriarch who bears the fruits of her tenacity, not only for herself, but also for those who watch with awe. Her grandchildren, eyes wide with curiosity and admiration, serve as the most precious witnesses to her journey. Through conversations woven with wisdom and resilience, she entrusts them with stories of transformation, so that they too may carry forward the invaluable lessons her life has taught. These tender dialogues become her lessons in legacy, teaching them not only about the significance of inner strength, but also about the courage required to demand respect and nurture self-worth. She ensures they understand the profundity of her metamorphosis. Her stories echo with themes of restorative justice and the healing power of time, offering guidance for when they will inevitably, like everyone, face their own storms. In moments of solitude, her thoughts drift to the blank canvas the future presents. The horizon, once a mere illusion beyond her perceived constraints, now unfolds with magnificent potential. Venturing into community activities and empowerment circles, she steps beyond the familial roles that once defined her. She stretches her wingspan further, engaging with others who are also on their journeys of healing and growth. The connections she builds within these supportive networks serve as mutual sanctuaries where stories are shared and hearts are mended. Her newfound perspective treats life as a symphony, with each day an opportunity to write the notes of authenticity, compassion, and joy. The skills she cultivated in managing familial operations, negotiation, perseverance, and adaptation convert exquisitely into tools for involvement in community advocacy and personal hobbies. She finds pleasure in painting, capturing the colors of her emancipation, translating those vivid hues onto canvases that tell tales of struggle and resilience alike. Social gatherings become stage settings where her story ripples outward, inspiring a chorus of change among those entrapped by similar binds of invisibility. Her presence at local seminars and workshops becomes a channel through which she shares the practical step-by-step approach that others can emulate in their quests for self-betterment and respect within relationships. Pain becomes a universal language, but empowerment speaks more profoundly, transforming listeners' burdens into badges of courage and points of personal revolution. As dusk falls and the challenges of her past threateningly whisper in the periphery, she stands firm in a newfound resolve. There is no room for the shadows here, only light, only understanding. Her once tumultuous relationship with her son and his family now thrives under the watchful repair of a woman who knows her worth, who recognizes her place not just as a mother or grandmother, but as a woman deserving of latitude and reverence. The recalibration of familial dynamics ensures healthy boundaries. Her children's eyes are now opening to the realities of sacrifice, reciprocity, and the unwavering strength required to uphold familial honor. As they continue to evolve, she stands not as a controlling force, but as a guardian of her values, fostering an environment where mutual respect flourishes. In the ebb and flow of tides, she recognizes not just cycles of nature but those within human relationships, trajectories that have been amended, lessons that have reshaped life's landscape. She holds no grudges or grievances, only the silent, simple acknowledgement of triumph over adversity. The clarity she gains brings serenity and stability, a sanctuary built with bricks of trial and mortar of triumph. She walks now with unbound dignity, traveling a path that has finally wholly become her own, leading her toward depths as yet undiscovered and joys as yet unsung. Resilient and dear her heart is a monument to where she's been and a lodestar for where she's going. No longer a vessel of someone else's design, she embraces the truth of who she is, a luminary of strength, a sentinel of love, a living testament to life lived fully and unapologetically on her terms. Shadows of the past may linger, but they cast warmth instead of coldness, for her heart now beats in rhythm with freedom. She rests in the knowledge that she indeed came home. In the gentle light of morning, she walked through an empty house that once seemed noisy with unresolved conflicts and shrouded secrets. Now silence blanketed the air, but it was a silence she cherished, a silence that sang of victories quietly won and battles gracefully walked away from. As she stood in the doorway of a sunlit room, the weight of past betrayals melted into mere echoes, distant and hollow. She was free. She was unshackled by the needs or judgments of others. The emptiness of the room around her mirrored the fullness she felt inside, a paradox that spoke of a strength that did not need to proclaim itself. Her children had learned. They had grown painfully but earnestly through the lessons life had woven into their paths. In their remorse, she saw the faded shadows of her own past missteps, and in their struggle for redemption, she recognized her own journey from despair to dignity. The struggle was theirs now, a legacy not of bitterness but of survival and growth which they would one day pass on to their own children. A quiet satisfaction welled within her as she realized that her silence was now her strength and her absence was a living testament to her indomitable will. He might have thought he'd broken her when he cast her aside, the whispers of doubt he sowed, the dismissals that felt like hardened stones flung at her dreams. Yet here she stood, unbowed and untethered, the embodiment of resilience forged in the crucible of betrayal. She was no longer haunted by the ghosts of broken vows and silent sufferings. Instead, she had embraced them and let them become part of the tapestry of who she now was, a woman who had redefined the terms of what it meant to be bound to family. She moved like a whisper through the spaces of her life, unafraid of what lay beyond the next sunrise, for she had learned that not all endings are heartbreak. The silence this journey gifted her was the most hallowed form of freedom. And you, if you found yourself on the precipice of such change, would you stand strong, allowing silence to be your voice? Would you, like her, forsake the petty victory of being acknowledged in favor of a serene, profound alchemy that transforms wounds into wisdom shared with those wise enough to listen? In the face of betrayal, would you wield the power of your truth gently, knowing that real strength sometimes hides in the folds of quiet resolve? Some closures don't scream their arrival with dramatic thunder, nor do they seek an audience to affirm their significance. Instead, they arrive like the soft descent of evening, cloaking the world with peace and comprehension. Her story was never one of revenge or retribution. It was the echo of courage whispered on the wings of time, a legacy immortalized, not in the hearts that had hurt her, but in the souls she had inspired and the futures she had forged anew in quiet defiance. She did not need to tell them they were forgiven, for the door was never locked. Forgiveness, as she found, was the act of unlocking oneself from the chains of past grievances and walking untouched by the barbs of resentment. She had become forgiveness personified, a sanctuary of acceptance rather than a monument to grievances adjudicated in familial court. What she left behind was a chance, a possibility of repair recognized by absence more than presence. As she stood on the threshold of her home, a place reborn in love, no longer a dwelling of memories stolen by neglect, but a testament to second chances, a breeze stirred through the room, lifting the veil of solitude to reveal something fuller, richer. She breathed it in deeply, feeling her power and freedom with each inhalation. She knew the path behind her was a map for those yet to walk it, a path knitted with the hopes and dreams of all those who might one day rise as she had. For her silence needed no voice. It was a kingdom she ruled with confidence, peace her ally, and authenticity her crown. Some endings are not loud. Instead, they are sacred, like the gentle fall of leaves that adorn the earth with stories of past seasons. She realized then, with an overwhelming simplicity, that every shadow the past cast was merely a reminder that light had been present all the while, perhaps too subtly, too quietly. And as she turned away from her memories, her footsteps were soft, yet within them walked the echoes of a world healed and a spirit unbroken.